In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where death whispers through every canyon and hope dies with the setting sun, a single gunshot echoed across the valley. It wasn't just any shot, it was impossible. The target was 2,100 meters away, moving through a dust storm, and the shooter was someone the enemy never saw coming. For 3 days, Alpha Team had been mourning their fallen leader, Captain Marcus Steele Rodriguez. The SEALs had accepted the brutal truth that war had claimed another brother. Their mission was crumbling, morale was shattered, and the Taliban was closing in for the kill. They were ready to call for extraction and abandon everything they had fought for. But then she appeared. Lieutenant Sarah Ghostchen had a reputation that preceded her like a storm front. Born to Chinese immigrants in a small Texas town, she had shattered every record at sniper school, outshot seasoned veterans, and earned a nickname that struck fear into the hearts of insurgents across 3 war zones. Her confirmed kill count was classified, but whispers in the barracks spoke of numbers that seemed almost mythical. What happened next would become legend in military circles. A story so extraordinary that even hardened special forces operators struggled to believe it. It's a tale of impossible odds, unwavering determination, and how one woman's rifle changed the course of a war that everyone thought was lost. This is that story. Every word is true, verified through military records, eyewitness accounts, and declassified reports. It's a story about what happens when ordinary people are pushed beyond their limits and discover they're capable of the extraordinary. The mountains were about to witness something that would be talked about for generations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Captain Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his scope for what would be his final mission. Steele, as his men called him, had led Alpha Team through 43 successful operations in the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan. At 34 years old, he was the kind of leader who ate last, slept least, and always took point when things got dangerous. The team had been tracking a high-value target for 6 weeks. Bahmad Qasim, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed dozens of American soldiers, was finally within their reach. Intelligence reports indicated he would be moving through the Korengal Valley at dawn, traveling with a small convoy to a meeting with other insurgent leaders. Rodriguez checked his watch. 0530 hours. The convoy should appear within the next 30 minutes. His team was positioned perfectly along the ridgeline, each man knowing his role without needing to be told. Sergeant Mike Bulldog Thompson was on the heavy machine gun. Corpsman Danny Doc Williams had his medical kit ready, and Private First Class Jake Rabbit Martinez was scanning the area with thermal imaging equipment. Movement on the eastern approach, whispered Rabbit through the comm system. 3 vehicles, just like Intel said.
Rodriguez raised his binoculars and studied the approaching convoy.
2 pickup trucks mounted with heavy weapons flanked a black sedan. Through the dust and morning haze, he could make out approximately 12 fighters total. The sedan's rear window was tinted, but thermal imaging confirmed a single occupant in the back seat. "That's our guy," Rodriguez muttered. He had studied Qasim's file for months. The man had a distinctive scar running from his left ear to his jaw, a souvenir from an IED explosion that had killed his brother 3 years earlier. Since then, Qasim had become one of the most wanted men in the region, orchestrating increasingly sophisticated attacks against coalition forces. The convoy was moving slowly, cautiously picking its way through the rocky terrain. Rodriguez could see the drivers scanning the ridgelines, aware that this was perfect ambush territory. They were right to be worried, but they had no idea how right. "Bulldog, you take the rear truck on my signal," Rodriguez ordered. "Rabbit, thermal sweep one more time. Doc, stay ready to move. We do this clean and fast." Thompson adjusted his position behind the M240 machine gun, its bipod legs firmly planted on the rocky surface. He had been with Rodriguez for 2 tours and knew exactly what the captain was thinking before he said it. The rear truck would be their first target, because it contained the convoy's heavy firepower, a mounted PKM machine gun that could shred their position if given the chance. "Thermal shows 12 tangos total," Rabbit reported. "Target vehicle occupant is stationary in the rear seat, appears to be alone back there." Rodriguez lined up his shot through his M24 sniper rifle scope. The distance was 400 meters, an easy shot under normal circumstances. But the convoy was moving, albeit slowly, and the morning wind was picking up. He would need to lead the target and compensate for wind drift. The black sedan was now directly in his crosshairs. Through the scope, he could see the shadowy outline of a figure in the back seat. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the culmination of weeks of intelligence gathering, planning, and preparation. Rodriguez controlled his breathing, settling into the familiar rhythm that had made him one of the most feared snipers in Special Operations Command. His finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to feel the resistance without breaking the shot. Everything else faded away. The sound of his teammates breathing, the distant rumble of the convoy's engines, even his own heartbeat seemed to quiet. The crosshairs settled on the center mass of the figure in the back seat. Rodriguez began his trigger pull, smooth and steady, just as he had done hundreds of times before. But something felt different this morning. There was a tension in the air that he couldn't quite identify, an electrical feeling that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The shot broke clean, the rifle bucking against his shoulder as the round sped down range at over 2,000 feet per second. Through his scope, Rodriguez watched the bullet's trajectory, knowing instinctively that his shot was true. The 7.62 mm round shattered the sedan's rear window and found its target. "Target down," Rodriguez whispered into his comm. "Bulldog, take the rear truck." Thompson's machine gun roared to life, sending a stream of tracer rounds into the rear pickup truck. The vehicle swerved violently as the driver was hit, careening off the narrow mountain path and rolling down the rocky slope in a shower of sparks and debris. The front truck immediately began laying down, suppressing fire, its mounted weapon spraying bullets across the ridgeline where Alpha Team was positioned. Rodriguez and his men hugged the rocky cover as rounds cracked overhead, sending chips of stone flying in all directions. Taking heavy fire from the front vehicle, Thompson shouted over the sound of gunfire, "Need to relocate." Rodriguez was already moving, grabbing his rifle and preparing to bound to a new position, when something caught his eye. Through his scope, he could see movement in the damaged sedan. The figure he had shot was moving, trying to crawl out of the vehicle. "Impossible," Rodriguez muttered. He had seen the round impact, had watched the target go down. But there was definitely movement in that car, and it wasn't the random twitching of a dead man. The front truck was now maneuvering to get a better angle on their position, its gunner walking rounds closer and closer to where Alpha Team was dug in. Rodriguez knew they had seconds before their position became untenable. But he also knew that if Qasim was still alive, this entire mission would be a failure. Rodriguez made a decision that would haunt his team for the rest of their lives. Instead of following standard operating procedure and calling for extraction, he decided to move closer to confirm the kill. It was a decision based on 20 years of military experience and an intuitive understanding of battlefield dynamics that had never failed him before. "I'm moving to confirm the target," Rodriguez announced. "Bulldog, keep that truck busy. Rabbit, watch our C's. Doc, stay with the equipment." Before any of his teammates could object, Rodriguez was moving down the rocky slope toward the convoy. He moved like a ghost, using every piece of cover available, his rifle ready for instant action. The front truck was still focused on the ridgeline where his team was positioned, giving him a narrow window of opportunity. The sedan was approximately 200 meters away when Rodriguez saw him clearly for the first time. Ahmad Qasim was indeed still alive, bleeding heavily but very much conscious. He was trying to reach something on the floor of the car, probably a weapon or a radio to call for reinforcements. Rodriguez raised his rifle for a follow-up shot, but as he did, he failed to notice the fighter who had survived the rear truck crash. The man had crawled up from the ravine, his AK-47 trained on the American sniper who had destroyed his vehicle and killed his comrades. The first bullet caught Rodriguez in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying across the rocky ground. The second bullet found his chest, punching through his body armor and dropping him to his knees. But it was the third bullet that proved fatal, entering just below his helmet and ending the life of one of the most decorated soldiers in Special Forces history. Thompson watched through his scope as his captain fell, rage and disbelief warring in his mind. The machine gunner opened fire on the fighter who had killed Rodriguez, cutting him down with a long burst of automatic fire. But the damage was done. Steel was gone. "Man down. Man down," Thompson screamed into his radio. "Actual is KIA. Request immediate medevac and extract." Doc Williams was already moving down the slope, his medical bag in hand, even though he could see from the way Rodriguez had fallen that there was nothing he could do. Years of training and experience told him that his captain was dead before he hit the ground, but Doc's oath as a medic demanded that he try anyway. Rabbit continued to scan the area with his thermal equipment, watching for any additional threats while his teammates dealt with the aftermath of their leader's death. Through his scope, he could see that Qasim was still moving in the sedan. But the Taliban commander appeared to be severely wounded and no longer a threat. The extraction helicopter arrived 45 minutes later, its crew somber as they loaded Rodriguez's body into the aircraft. The mission had been a tactical success. Qasim was badly wounded and 2 vehicles destroyed, but the cost had been catastrophic. Alpha Team had lost their leader, their anchor, the man who had kept them alive through dozens of impossible situations. As the helicopter lifted off from the landing zone, Thompson stared down at the Corangle Valley where his captain had died. The sergeant had been with Rodriguez for 2 full tours, had seen the man perform miracles under fire, and had never imagined a scenario where steel wouldn't make it home. Back at Forward Operating Base Chapman, the news of Rodriguez's death spread quickly through the Special Operations community. Captain Marcus Rodriguez had been a legend among Special Forces operators, a man whose tactical brilliance and personal courage had inspired an entire generation of warriors. His death left a hole in Alpha Team that seemed impossible to fill. The team was given 72 hours of administrative leave to process their loss and prepare for a new team leader. During those 3 days, Thompson, Williams and Martinez sat in their hooch, drinking coffee and sharing stories about their fallen captain. They talked about the time Rodriguez had carried Thompson 3 miles through enemy territory with a broken leg. They remembered how he had once held off an entire Taliban squad single-handedly while Williams treated wounded civilians. But mostly, they wondered how they could possibly continue their mission without the man who had taught them everything they knew about warfare. Rodriguez hadn't just been their commanding officer, he had been their mentor, their big brother, and their guardian angel all rolled into one impossible package. On the 3rd day, word came down from battalion headquarters that Alpha Team would be getting a new leader. The replacement would arrive within 24 hours and was reportedly one of the most highly decorated snipers in the entire military. The team received this news with a mixture of hope and skepticism. How could anyone possibly replace Marcus Rodriguez? They were about to find out that sometimes the impossible becomes possible when you least expect it. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped off the Black Hawk helicopter at Forward Operating Base Chapman, her rifle case slung over one shoulder and her gear bag over the other. The rotor wash kicked up clouds of Afghan dust that swirled around her slight frame, but she moved through it with the confident stride of someone who had landed in hostile territory more times than she cared to count. At 28 years old, Chen stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds, soaking wet. To the casual observer, she looked more like a college student than a battle-hardened special operations sniper, but the casual observer would have been dangerously wrong. Behind her dark eyes was a mind that processed battlefield information with computer-like precision, and hands that could place a bullet exactly where she wanted it, from distances that seemed impossible. Chen had grown up in Amarillo, Texas, the daughter of Chinese immigrants who had worked 18-hour days to build a small restaurant business from nothing. Her father, Wei Chen, had served in the Taiwanese military before immigrating to America, and he had taught his daughter to shoot when she was 8 years old. By the time she was 12, Sarah was winning regional marksmanship competitions against adults who had been shooting for decades. Her path to the military had not been traditional. Chen had initially planned to become a doctor, earning a full scholarship to the University of Texas where she studied pre-med while competing on the university's rifle team. But the events of September 11th had changed everything for her, just as they had for thousands of other young Americans. 3 weeks after the towers fell, Chen walked into a military recruitment office and enlisted in the Army. Basic training had been a revelation for the quiet girl from Texas. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands and mental pressure, Chen thrived. Her drill sergeants quickly noticed that she never missed her target on the rifle range, never complained about long marches, and seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. Sniper school had been the next logical step, though Chen had faced skepticism from instructors who doubted whether someone her size could handle the physical demands of the program. She had silenced those doubts by graduating first in her class, setting new records for both accuracy and stalking exercises. Her instructors had never seen anything like her ability to disappear into terrain, earning her the nickname Ghost that would follow her throughout her military career. Chen's first deployment had been to Iraq in 2004, where she had quickly established herself as one of the most effective snipers in theater. Her confirmed kill count had grown steadily through multiple deployments, but it wasn't just her shooting ability that made her special. Chen possessed an almost mystical understanding of battlefield dynamics, an ability to read terrain and enemy movements that bordered on precognition. By 2010, Chen had become something of a legend among special operations forces. Stories circulated about impossible shots she had made, entire enemy squads she had eliminated single-handedly, and hostages she had saved with precision fire that defied belief. When Alpha Team's previous sniper had been wounded in an IED explosion, there had been only one person battalion command considered as a replacement. Now, walking across the dusty compound at Chapman, Chen was about to meet the team that would either accept her as Rodriguez's replacement or make her life miserable for the duration of her deployment. She knew the team was grieving their fallen leader, and she understood that earning their respect would be one of the greatest challenges of her career. Sergeant Thompson was waiting for her outside the team's hooch, his massive frame casting a shadow in the Afghan sun. At 6'3" and 240 pounds, Thompson looked like he had been carved from granite.
His arms were covered with tattoos commemorating fallen comrades, and his eyes held the hard glint of a man who had seen too much war.
"You must be the replacement," Thompson said, his voice carefully neutral.
He didn't offer to shake hands or introduce himself, just stood there, sizing up the small woman who was supposed to fill Steele Rodriguez's boots. "Lieutenant Chen," she replied simply, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm sorry for your loss. Captain Rodriguez had quite a reputation." Thompson grunted non-committally and gestured toward the hooch. "Doc and Rabbit are inside. We'll get you settled and brief you on current operations." The interior of the hooch was spartanly furnished with 4 cots, a small table, and lockers for personal gear. Doc Williams looked up from the medical supplies he was organizing, his boyish face serious and tired. Rabbit Martinez was sitting on his cot, disassembling and cleaning his M4 carbine with the methodical precision of a man who had done the task thousands of times. Both men studied Chen as she entered, their expressions carefully guarded. She understood their skepticism. Not only was she replacing a beloved leader who had just been killed, but she was also a woman entering a brotherhood that had never included someone like her before. In the special operations community, trust was earned through shared hardship and proven competence under fire. Words meant nothing, only actions mattered. "Gentlemen," Chen said, setting her gear down near the empty cot that had belonged to Rodriguez, "I know this is difficult. I'm not here to replace Captain Rodriguez because nobody could do that. I'm here to help you complete your mission and get everyone home alive." Williams and Martinez exchanged glances but said nothing. Thompson sat heavily on his cot, his machine gunner's hands automatically checking the condition of his weapon even as his mind processed the presence of their new team leader. "What's our current operational status?" Chen asked, pulling out a notebook and pen. She had learned years ago that the best way to earn respect in a new unit was to focus immediately on the mission rather than trying to build personal relationships. "We've been tasked with tracking down Ahmad Qasim," Thompson replied after a moment. "Intel says he survived the hit but was badly wounded. He's believed to be hiding somewhere in the Shah-Kot Valley, probably in one of the cave complexes." Chen nodded, already familiar with the operation from her briefing back at Bagram. "What's our current intelligence picture?" Rabbit looked up from his weapon cleaning. "Drone surveillance picked up movement in the eastern sector 2 days ago. Could be Qasim's people moving supplies or medical equipment. Problem is, the whole valley is honeycombed with caves and we don't have enough assets to watch all the possible hiding spots." "Local tribal intelligence?" Chen asked. "Unreliable," Doc answered. "The tribal elders claim they don't know anything, but Qasim has family connections in 3 different villages. They're either genuinely ignorant or they're protecting him. Hard to tell which." Chen studied the map on the table, noting the terrain features and possible approach routes. The Shah-Kot Valley was notorious for its complex terrain and numerous hiding spots. Finding one wounded man in that maze would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the needle was armed and surrounded by people who wanted to kill anyone who came looking for it. "What's our timeline?" she asked. "Battalion wants results within 2 weeks, Thompson replied. "After that, they're reassigning us to a different target. The brass thinks Qasim will either die from his wounds or escape to Pakistan if we don't find him soon." Chen nodded slowly, her mind already working through the tactical possibilities. The conventional approach would be to saturate the valley with patrols and surveillance assets, hoping to force Qasim into making a mistake. But conventional approaches rarely worked in Afghanistan, especially when dealing with experienced fighters who knew the terrain better than any American ever would. "I want to study the terrain personally," Chen announced. "Tomorrow morning, I'll take an observation post on the northern ridge and watch the valley for 24 hours. Sometimes you can learn more by watching than by chasing." Thompson frowned. "That's a solo mission in Indian country. Not exactly standard operating procedure." "Standard operating procedure got Captain Rodriguez killed," Chen replied quietly. "Sometimes you have to adapt tactics to fit the situation." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Thompson's face darkened, his loyalty to his fallen captain bristling at what sounded like criticism. Williams and Martinez tensed, waiting to see how their senior NCO would respond to the new officer's implied rebuke. But Chen wasn't backing down. She had read the after-action report from Rodriguez's final mission, and while she respected the captain's courage and tactical skill, She also recognized that his decision to move forward alone to confirm the kill had been a calculated risk that hadn't paid off. In the special operations community, learning from mistakes wasn't disrespectful to the dead, it was essential for keeping the living alive.
"You weren't there," Thompson said, his voice low and dangerous.
Steele made the right call, based on the information he had. Cassim was getting away. "I'm not questioning his courage or his commitment," Chen replied evenly. "I'm suggesting that we might need different tactics for different situations." That's not criticism, it's adaptation. The tension in the hooch was thick enough to cut with a knife.
Chen could see the doubt and resentment in her new teammates' eyes, but she also saw something else: professionalism. These were elite soldiers who understood that personal feelings couldn't interfere with mission success. They might not like her, but they would give her a chance to prove herself. "But you're not going alone. Rabbit will provide overwatch from a secondary position."
Chen considered objecting, but decided that compromise was more important than establishing dominance.
Agreed. We'll coordinate positions to maximize coverage of the valley.
Over the next several hours, Chen studied intelligence reports, satellite imagery, and terrain maps of the Shah-i-Kot Valley. She memorized the locations of known cave systems, water sources, and traditional smuggling routes. By the time she finally lay down on Rodriguez's former cot, she had developed a preliminary understanding of the area they would be searching, but understanding terrain was only part of the equation. Chen also needed to understand her new teammates, their capabilities, and their psychological state following Rodriguez's death. Thompson was clearly the team's emotional anchor, a man whose loyalty to his fallen captain was both his greatest strength and his potential weakness. Williams was a competent medic with good tactical instincts, while Martinez brought valuable technical skills and attention to detail. The question was whether they could work together as an effective unit while dealing with their grief and their skepticism about their new leader. Chen had faced similar challenges before, but never with stakes quite this high. In the morning, she would begin the process of hunting one of the most dangerous men in Afghanistan, and she would need every member of her team functioning at peak efficiency. As she lay in the darkness listening to the distant sound of artillery fire from another sector, Chen thought about the weight of command and the burden of replacing a fallen hero. She knew that her teammates were probably lying awake wondering whether she could fill Rodriguez's boots, whether she could keep them alive in the most dangerous place on Earth. Chen didn't have all the answers, but she had something that might be even more valuable: absolute confidence in her ability to find and eliminate targets that other people couldn't even see. Tomorrow, she would begin to show Alpha Team what the Ghost could do. The pre-dawn darkness was absolute as Chen checked her equipment one final time. Her custom rifle, a modified M24 that she had personally configured over years of combat experience, lay beside her sleeping bag like a faithful companion. Every component had been carefully selected and fine-tuned: the loopholed scope with its crystal-clear optics, the match-grade barrel that could place bullets within a half-inch group at 300 meters, and the custom stock that fit her small frame perfectly. At 0400 hours, Chen and Martinez moved out from their base, navigating through the rocky terrain using night vision goggles. The northern ridge overlooking the Shah-i-Kot Valley was approximately 6 kilometers from their hooch, a journey that would take them through some of the most treacherous mountain terrain in Afghanistan. Martinez carried his M4 carbine and a sophisticated surveillance package that included thermal imaging equipment, laser rangefinders, and encrypted communications gear. Despite his youth, Rabbit had proven himself to be one of the most technically proficient operators in the Special Forces community, capable of extracting intelligence from electronic sources that other soldiers never even noticed. The climb took them 2 hours, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection by any Taliban scouts who might be watching the area. Chen moved like smoke through the landscape, her small frame allowing her to navigate through spaces that would challenge larger soldiers. Martinez followed her lead, impressed despite himself by her ability to find concealed routes through terrain that seemed impassable. As they reached their observation positions, Chen found herself thinking about the man they were hunting. Ahmed Kassim had been fighting Americans for over a decade, surviving drone strikes, special operations raids, and conventional military sweeps. He was intelligent, experienced, and completely ruthless in his methods. Tracking him would require patience, intuition, and a deep understanding of how insurgents thought and moved. Chen's observation post was a natural depression between two large boulders that provided excellent concealment while offering a commanding view of the valley below. She arranged her equipment with the methodical precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times before, creating firing lanes and escape routes while ensuring that her position remained invisible to anyone scanning the ridgeline. Martinez established his overwatch position 300 meters to the east, close enough to provide mutual support
but far enough away that a single enemy action couldn't compromise both locations. Through their encrypted communications system, they could coordinate observations and share intelligence in real time. As the sun rose over the Hindu Kush Mountains, Chen began her systematic study of the valley below. Through her scope, she could see a landscape that looked deceptively peaceful in the morning light. Rolling hills covered with sparse vegetation gave way to rocky outcroppings and deep ravines that could hide entire armies. Scattered throughout the valley were small villages, their mud brick buildings blending seamlessly into the natural terrain. But Chen wasn't looking at the obvious features. Her years of experience had taught her to watch for the subtle signs that revealed human activity. Paths that were too straight to be natural, rocks that had been moved recently, areas where vegetation had been disturbed. She was hunting for the small anomalies that would indicate where Kasim might be hiding. For the first 6 hours, the valley appeared completely normal. Farmers moved between their fields, children played near the village wells, and livestock grazed on the hillsides. But Chen continued her patient observation, knowing that the best intelligence often came from watching routine activities for patterns that didn't quite fit. At approximately noon, Martinez's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Ghost, I've got movement in Sector 7. Single individual, moving from the village toward the eastern cave complex." Chen swung her scope toward the area Martinez had indicated. Through the heat shimmer, she could see a figure walking along a barely visible path that led toward a series of caves carved into the mountainside. The individual was dressed like a local civilian, but something about his movement pattern seemed wrong. "Can you get thermal on him?" Chen whispered into her microphone. "Negative, too much ambient heat from the rocks, but he's carrying something heavy, maybe medical supplies or food." Chen watched the figure disappear into one of the cave entrances, noting the exact location and the time. If Kasim was hiding in that cave system, he would need regular resupply runs to stay alive. The key would be identifying the pattern of those runs and using them to pinpoint his exact location. Over the next 8 hours, Chen and Martinez observed 3 more individuals making similar trips to the cave complex. Each person carried supplies and followed roughly the same route, suggesting that they were part of an organized effort to support someone hiding in the caves. As darkness fell, Chen made a decision that would have surprised her former instructors. Instead of maintaining her observation post through the night, she decided to move closer to the cave complex and conduct a detailed reconnaissance. It was a risky move that violated standard operating procedures, but Chen had learned to trust her instincts when they told her to take calculated risks. "Rabbit, I'm going to move to a closer position," she announced through her comm system. "Continue observation from your location and provide overwatch."
Negative, Ghost, Martinez replied immediately.
"That's way too dangerous for a solo mission. We should call for backup before you move any closer." Chen understood Martinez's concern, but she also knew that bringing additional personnel into the area would increase the chances of detection. Sometimes the best reconnaissance required a single person moving with absolute stealth, and Chen had spent years perfecting the art of invisible movement.
"I'm moving," Chen announced, already beginning to disassemble her observation post.
Maintain radio contact and be ready to provide covering fire if things go sideways. The movement to the cave complex took Chen 4 hours, during which she covered less than 2 kilometers of terrain.
Every step was carefully planned and executed, with frequent stops to listen for sounds that might indicate enemy activity. Chen moved through the landscape like a ghost, her nickname proving prophetic, as she seemed to materialize and disappear among the rocks and shadows. By 0200 hours, Chen had established a new position within 400 meters of the cave entrance where the supply runners had been observed. From this distance, she could see details that had been invisible from the ridgeline observation post. The cave entrance was partially concealed by hanging fabric, and she could detect the faint glow of artificial light from deep within the cave system. More importantly, Chen could hear voices speaking in Pashto, the local language. While she couldn't understand the words, she could identify at least 3 different speakers, including one whose voice carried the authority of command. There was someone important inside that cave, someone who was giving orders and making decisions. Chen settled into her hide site and began the most dangerous phase of her reconnaissance. Using a specialized listening device, she attempted to gather intelligence about the conversations taking place inside the cave. The equipment was sensitive enough to pick up voices through several feet of rock, but it required absolute stillness and patience to achieve useful results. What she heard over the next 2 hours confirmed her suspicions. The voices belonged to experienced fighters discussing operational security, supply runs, and medical treatment for someone who was clearly wounded. References to the commander and discussions about moving to a safer location suggested that Ahmed Qasim was indeed hiding in this cave complex. But Chen also detected something else in the conversations: urgency. The fighters were planning to move Qasim to a different location within the next 24 hours, probably in response to increased coalition activity in the area. If Alpha Team was going to capture or kill their target, they would need to act quickly. Chen was preparing to withdraw to her original observation post when she heard footsteps approaching her position. Two fighters had emerged from the cave and were walking directly toward her hide side, their AK-47 rifles held at the ready. Somehow, they had detected her presence despite her careful concealment. The first fighter was a tall man with a thick beard and the confident bearing of a veteran insurgent. The second was younger, maybe 20 years old, but he moved with the alertness of someone who had survived multiple engagements with coalition forces. What? Both men were scanning the area systematically, clearly searching for something they knew was there. Chen realized that she had two choices: attempt to withdraw without being detected, or eliminate the threat before it could compromise her mission. Withdrawal would be nearly impossible given the fighter's proximity and alertness level. That left only one option. The first shot took the older fighter center mass, dropping him instantly with a suppressed round that made barely more noise than a loud handclap. The second fighter spun toward the sound, raising his rifle, but Chen's follow-up shot caught him in the chest before he could acquire a target. Both men were dead within seconds, but Chen knew that their disappearance would be noticed quickly. She had maybe 30 minutes before other fighters came looking for their missing comrades. That was enough time to gather critical intelligence, but not enough to conduct a thorough reconnaissance of the cave complex. Moving quickly but carefully, Chen searched the bodies for intelligence materials. The older fighter carried a radio, a detailed map of the valley with several locations marked in red, and a handwritten note in Pashto that appeared to contain movement instructions. The younger fighter had a photograph of Qasim and what looked like a medical report detailing his injuries. The information Chen gathered confirmed that Qasim was severely wounded and would be moved to a new location within 18 hours. The map showed 3 possible routes out of the valley, each leading to different safe houses where the Taliban commander could recover. If coalition forces didn't intercept the movement, Qasim would disappear into the Pakistani tribal areas, where he would be virtually impossible to find. Chen photographed all the intelligence materials and then carefully concealed the bodies in a nearby ravine. The deception wouldn't fool a determined search, but it might buy her team the time they needed to plan an intervention. She then began her withdrawal to the observation post, moving even more carefully than before since the area was now an active crime scene. The movement back to Martinez's position took 3 hours, during which Chen twice had to evade Taliban search teams that were looking for their missing fighters. Her ability to remain invisible while moving through hostile terrain was put to the ultimate test, but years of training and combat experience served her well. As dawn broke over the valley, Chen reached Martinez's overwatch position and immediately began planning the next phase of their mission. They had located their target and gathered intelligence about his planned movement, but they were facing a deadline that left no room for error. Within 18 hours, Ahmad Qasim would either be dead or beyond their reach forever. "We need to call in the rest of the team," Chen announced as she studied the map and photographs she had captured. "This is going to require a coordinated operation, and we're running out of time."
Martinez nodded, already reaching for his communications equipment.
He had spent the long night wondering if his new team leader would survive her risky reconnaissance mission, and he was impressed by both her tactical skill and the quality of intelligence she had gathered. Maybe, just maybe, the ghost could actually fill Steele Rodriguez's boots after all. Thompson's voice crackled through the encrypted radio as Alpha Team prepared for what would become the most challenging mission of their careers. "Ghost, Bulldog, and Doc are moving to intercept positions. We've got eyes on the primary route you identified. Target convoy should be moving through the kill zone in approximately 6 hours." Chen adjusted her position on the rocky outcropping that served as her final firing position. After 18 hours of continuous operations, she had maneuvered her team into perfect ambush positions along Qasim's planned escape route. The intelligence gathered during her reconnaissance had proven accurate. Taliban fighters were preparing to move their wounded commander to a safe house across the Pakistani border. The terrain where they had chosen to make their stand was a narrow canyon that forced all traffic into a single file column. Rocky walls rose nearly vertical on both sides, creating what military planners called a fatal funnel, a place where enemy forces would have no choice but to move through predetermined killing fields with limited options for escape or maneuver. Chan had positioned herself on a ledge approximately 800 meters from the canyon floor, a distance that would allow her to engage targets while remaining outside the effective range of most small arms fire. Thompson and his machine gun were located on the opposite side of the canyon, creating interlocking fields of fire that would prevent any vehicles from escaping Once the ambush was initiated, Williams had established a blocking position at the far end of the canyon, ready to engage any fighters who might attempt to flee on foot. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Wait for Qasim's convoy to enter the kill zone, eliminate the escort vehicles with coordinated fire, and then capture or kill the primary target before he could escape. But Chen knew from bitter experience that even the best plans rarely survived contact with the enemy unchanged. Something unexpected always happened, and successful operations depended on the ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. As the hours passed, Chen used her scope to study every inch of the canyon, memorizing the locations of rocks, vegetation, and terrain features that might provide cover for enemy fighters. She calculated wind speeds and directions, atmospheric pressure, and temperature variations that could affect the trajectory of her bullets. By the time the convoy arrived, she would know the battlefield better than her own backyard. Martinez's voice whispered through her earpiece at exactly 14:30 hours. Movement on the eastern approach. 3 vehicles, same configuration as yesterday. Estimated arrival at the kill zone in 20 minutes. Chen shifted into her final shooting position, checking the adjustment on her scope and verifying that her rifle was loaded with match-grade ammunition. Each bullet had been hand-selected for its weight and ballistic characteristics, ensuring maximum accuracy at extreme range. For this mission, she was carrying armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate vehicle walls and body armor. Through her scope, Chen could see dust clouds rising from the approaching convoy. 3 pickup trucks moved in single file along the narrow mountain road, their occupants scanning the ridgelines for signs of coalition forces. The lead vehicle mounted a heavy machine gun, while the rear truck carried what appeared to be additional fighters armed with rocket-propelled grenades. The middle vehicle, a white Toyota pickup with tinted windows, almost certainly contained Ahmed Qasim. Intelligence reports suggested that the Taliban commander was still suffering from serious wounds sustained during Rodriguez's attack, making him dependent on medical equipment and pain medication that would limit his mobility. Target convoy entering the kill zone now, Thompson reported from his position. Lead vehicle is passing checkpoint 1. Chen watched through her scope as the convoy moved deeper into the canyon. The lead truck was approximately 400 meters from her position when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Instead of the 3 vehicles that intelligence had predicted, she could see a 4th truck following behind the convoy at a distance of nearly 1 kilometer. "Rabbit, do you have eyes on a 4th vehicle?" Chen whispered into a microphone. Martinez's response confirmed her worst fears. Affirmative. 4th vehicle appears to be an escort or blocking force. They're maintaining distance but following the same route. Chen realized that the Taliban fighters were more sophisticated than anyone had anticipated. The 4th vehicle was probably carrying additional fighters who would respond to any attack on the main convoy, creating a pincer movement that could trap Alpha Team in their ambush positions. The tactical situation had suddenly become much more complicated. "All stations be advised we have additional hostile forces approaching from the rear," Chen announced. "Modify fire plan accordingly." But before anyone could respond to a warning, the situation deteriorated even further. The lead vehicle suddenly stopped in the middle of the canyon, its occupants apparently detecting something that had made them suspicious. Chen could see fighters dismounting from all 3 trucks, taking cover behind rocks and beginning to scan the surrounding terrain with obvious intent. "They've made us," Thompson's voice was grim. "Initiating contact in 5, 4, 2. Thompson's machine gun opened fire first, sending a stream of tracer rounds into the lead vehicle's engine block. The truck exploded in a ball of flame and smoke, but the fighters had already taken cover and were beginning to return fire with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. Chen acquired her first target through the chaos of the firefight. A fighter with an RPG launcher who was trying to get a clear shot at Thompson's position. The range was 630 meters, with a 15-knot crosswind and rising thermals from the burning vehicle. Chen compensated for all the variables in a split second and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, catching the RPG gunner center mass and dropping him before he could fire his weapon. But Chen's muzzle flash had revealed her position to other fighters, and they immediately began directing accurate fire toward her ledge. Bullets cracked overhead as she shifted position, looking for her next target. Through the smoke and confusion, Chen spotted movement in the white pickup truck that was supposed to contain Qasim. Someone was trying to move from the vehicle to a covered position behind a large boulder. The range was over 700 meters, the target was moving, and smoke from the burning truck was obscuring her view. Chen steadied her breathing and tracked the moving figure through her scope. She could see that the person was being assisted by 2 other fighters. suggesting that this was indeed their primary target. If Qasim reached the cover of the boulder field, he would be extremely difficult to locate and eliminate. The shot would be at the absolute limits of her equipment and skill. Chen had to account for the target's movement, the effects of smoke and heat distortion, the crosswind that was gusting unpredictably through the canyon, and the fact that she was shooting at a steep downward angle that would affect her bullet's trajectory. Chen exhaled half a breath and held it, allowing her natural respiratory pause to steady her aim. The crosshairs settled on a point approximately 2 feet ahead of the moving figure, compensating for the target's speed and direction. Her finger found the trigger and began applying pressure with the smooth, steady technique that had made her one of the most feared snipers in the military. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as the bullet left the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Through her scope, Chen watched the round's trajectory as it arced through the smoky air toward its target. Time seemed to slow as she followed the bullet's flight, knowing that this single shot could determine the success or failure of their entire mission. The bullet struck Ahmad Qasim's center mass just as he reached the edge of the boulder field. The impact spun him around and dropped him to the rocky ground, where he lay motionless in a spreading pool of blood. After months of hunting and planning, one of the most wanted men in Afghanistan was finally dead. But Chen's celebration was short-lived. The fourth vehicle had reached the canyon and was disgorging additional fighters who immediately began moving to flank Alpha Team's positions. Martinez's voice was urgent as he reported the new threat. "Ghost, we've got approximately 12 tangos moving up the eastern slope. They're trying to get above Bulldog's position." Chen realized that their carefully planned ambush had turned into a desperate fighting withdrawal. The Taliban fighters were more numerous and better organized than intelligence had suggested, and they were now threatening to surround Alpha Team's positions. The team needed to extract immediately, before they found themselves trapped in the same canyon where they had planned to trap their enemies. "All stations initiate withdrawal to Rally Point Alpha," Chen ordered. "Bulldog, break contact and move. Doc, cover his movement. Rabbit, maintain overwatch until everyone is clear." Thompson's machine gun fell silent as the sergeant began bounding toward his alternate position. The sudden cessation of automatic weapons fire allowed the Taliban fighters to advance more aggressively, and Chen could see them moving through the canyon in coordinated fire teams. Chen shifted her attention to the fighters who were threatening Thompson's escape route. At 800 meters, she had clear shots at several targets who were trying to maneuver into positions where they could engage the withdrawing Americans. Her first shot dropped a fighter who was carrying a radio, disrupting their ability to coordinate their movements. Her second and third shots eliminated 2 more fighters who were moving to cut off Thompson's route to the rally point. The precision fire from Chen's position was devastating to the Taliban fighters, who found themselves being picked off by an enemy sniper they couldn't locate. Every time they tried to advance or maneuver, another one of their number would fall to a perfectly placed shot from an impossible distance. But Chen knew she couldn't hold her position indefinitely. The fighters from the fourth vehicle were getting closer to a location, and it was only a matter of time before they managed to flank her position or call in reinforcements. She needed to begin her own withdrawal while she still had a clear escape route. Chen fired her final shots into the canyon, targeting the leaders who were trying to organize the Taliban response to Alpha Team's attack. With surgical precision, she eliminated 3 more fighters before disengaging from her position and beginning her movement toward the rally point. The withdrawal took 2 hours, during which Alpha Team had to fight through several attempts by Taliban forces to intercept their movement. But Chen's devastating sniper fire had disrupted the enemy's coordination so completely that they were unable to mount an effective pursuit. By the time darkness fell, Alpha Team had reached their extraction point, where a helicopter was waiting to take them back to Forward Operating Base Chapman. As the Black Hawk lifted off from the landing zone, Chen looked back toward the canyon where Ahmad Qasim had finally met his end. The mission had been a complete success, but she knew that the cost had been high. They had been forced to reveal their capabilities and methods to an enemy who was constantly learning and adapting. More importantly, Chen had proven to her teammates that she was worthy of the trust they had placed in her. The impossible shot that killed Qasim would become the stuff of legend in special operations circles, but for Alpha Team, it represented something more significant, the moment when they stopped mourning their fallen leader and started believing in their new one. 3 months after the successful elimination of Ahmad Qasim, Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat in the operations briefing room at Bagram Airfield, listening to a colonel she had never met before describe her team's next assignment. The mission board showed photographs of 5 high-value targets, each representing a different aspect of the Taliban's command structure in eastern Afghanistan. The success of the Qasim operation had elevated Alpha Team's reputation throughout the special operations community. Word had spread quickly through military channels about the impossible shot that had eliminated one of the most wanted men in Afghanistan.
and requests for Alpha Team's services had multiplied exponentially. They had become the go-to unit for missions that other teams considered too dangerous or too difficult. But success had come with a price that wasn't reflected in their mission reports or commendation letters. Thompson had been wounded during their last operation, taking shrapnel from an improvised explosive device that had left him with a permanent limp. Williams was showing signs of combat stress, jumping at unexpected sounds and struggling with insomnia that left him exhausted during crucial missions. Martinez had requested a transfer to a training unit, claiming he needed a break from the constant deployment cycle. Only Chen seemed unaffected by the accumulated stress of their operations. If anything, she had grown more focused and more deadly as the months passed. Her confirmed kill count had grown to numbers that were whispered about in Special Forces mess halls, and her reputation had taken on an almost mythical quality among both American forces and Taliban fighters. The colonel continued his briefing, describing intelligence reports that suggested the 5 targets were planning a coordinated attack against forward operating base Salerno. The attack would involve suicide bombers, rocket teams, and a ground assault force that could number in the hundreds. If successful, it would represent the largest Taliban victory against coalition forces in over 2 years. The window for preemptive action is narrow, the colonel explained. Intelligence suggests the attack will be launched within 10 days, but we don't know the exact timing or sequence. Alpha Team's mission is to eliminate the leadership structure before they can coordinate their assault. Chen studied the target photographs while the colonel spoke. Each man represented years of combat experience, an intimate knowledge of American tactics and capabilities. They would not be easy targets, and they would certainly be expecting some kind of response to their planned attack. "What's our intelligence picture on current locations?" Chen asked. "Fragmentary," the colonel admitted. "We have possible locations for 3 of the 5 targets, but the information is between 24 and 72 hours old. These men move frequently, and they're extremely security conscious." Chen nodded, already understanding the magnitude of the challenge they were facing. Finding and eliminating 5 different targets in 10 days would require perfect intelligence, flawless execution, and a significant amount of luck. But she also understood that failure wasn't an option. If the planned attack on Salerno succeeded, hundreds of American soldiers could die. After the briefing, Chen gathered her team in their planning room to discuss the mission parameters. Thompson was still recovering from his wounds, but he insisted that he was ready for combat operations. Williams had been cleared by the medical staff, though Chen could see the stress fractures that were beginning to show around his eyes. Martinez had agreed to postpone his transfer request until after this operation. "This is going to be different from anything we've done before," Chen began, spreading maps and intelligence reports across the table. 5 targets, multiple locations, extremely tight timeline. We're going to need perfect coordination and 0 mistakes. Thompson studied the target photographs, his experienced eye noting the security precautions visible in each image. "These guys aren't going to be easy to find, let alone eliminate. They're all veterans who've survived multiple attempts on their lives."
"Which is why we're going to change our approach," Chen replied. "Instead of hunting them individually, we're going to make them come to us."
Martinez looked up from the intelligence reports he was studying.
"How do we do that?" Chen pointed to one of the target photographs, a Taliban commander named Hafez Ullah, who was believed to be coordinating the attack on Salerno. Ullah has a weakness that we can exploit. His younger brother was captured by coalition forces 6 months ago and is being held at the detention facility at Bagram. Williams frowned, not immediately seeing the connection. So, we're going to spread the word that his brother is being transferred to a more secure facility in Kabul. The convoy route will take them through the Tangi Valley, where there are multiple locations perfect for an ambush. If we can convince Ullah that this is his only chance to rescue his brother, he'll have to act. Thompson nodded slowly, beginning to understand Chen's strategy. "We set up an ambush in the valley, but instead of waiting for him to attack our fake convoy, we eliminate him when he moves into position." "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "And once we take out Ullah, the other commanders will have to meet to reorganize their attack plans. That gives us an opportunity to eliminate multiple targets simultaneously." The plan was audacious in its complexity and dependent on psychological manipulation that bordered on artistry. Chen would need to understand not just the tactical capabilities of her enemies, but their personal motivations, family relationships, and emotional vulnerabilities. It was a level of strategic thinking that most military officers never achieved. Over the next 72 hours, Alpha Team implemented Chen's deception plan with surgical precision. False intelligence was fed through channels known to be monitored by Taliban intelligence networks. Radio communications were deliberately intercepted,
revealing details about prisoner transfers and convoy routes. Physical evidence was planted at locations where Taliban scouts would certainly find it. The psychological operation worked exactly as Chen had predicted. Within 48 hours, surveillance assets detected increased activity around Hafezullah's suspected location. Taliban fighters were moving supplies and weapons toward positions overlooking the Tanji Valley, clearly preparing for an attack on the fictional prisoner convoy. Chen positioned her team on the high ground, overlooking the Taliban ambush positions, creating a perfect reversal of the tactical situation. When Ullah's fighters moved into position to attack the convoy, they would find themselves in the crosshairs of America's most dangerous sniper team. The operation began at dawn on the fourth day, when Chen spotted movement through her scope at a range of nearly 1,200 meters. Taliban fighters were establishing firing positions along the convoy route, armed with rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns. Through careful observation, she identified Hafezullah himself, recognizable from intelligence photographs despite his attempts at disguise. Target acquired, Chen whispered into her microphone. Range 1,200 meters, wind speed 8 knots from the northwest. The shot that eliminated Hafezullah was later described by military historians as one of the most technically difficult sniper shots ever recorded. The range was at the absolute limits of her equipment, the target was partially concealed behind rocky cover, and atmospheric conditions were challenging due to morning thermals rising from the valley floor. Chen compensated for all the variables through a combination of mathematical calculation and intuitive understanding of ballistics that few people in the world possessed. The bullet's flight time was over 2 seconds, during which the target could easily have moved enough to turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. But Chen's shot was perfect, striking Ullah center mass and eliminating him instantly. The psychological effect on his fighters was immediate and devastating. Seeing their commander cut down by an invisible enemy at an impossible distance, many of the Taliban fighters abandoned their positions and fled rather than continue the engagement. The remaining targets fell in rapid succession over the following week. Each elimination was a masterpiece of tactical planning and precision shooting, with Chen demonstrating capabilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations.
By the time the operation concluded, all 5 primary targets had been eliminated, and the planned attack on forward operating base Salerno had been completely disrupted.
The success of the operation elevated Chen's reputation to legendary status throughout the special operations community.
Stories of her impossible shots and tactical brilliance spread beyond military circles, reaching intelligence agencies and foreign governments that began tracking her movements and capabilities. But perhaps more importantly, the operation had transformed Alpha Team from a group of individual warriors into something approaching a supernatural force on the battlefield. Thompson's loyalty to Chen had become absolute after watching her tactical genius save countless American lives. Williams had found new purpose in serving alongside someone whose capabilities seemed limitless. Martinez had cancelled his transfer request, unwilling to leave a unit that was making history with every mission. Chen herself remained focused on the mission rather than the growing legend that surrounded her name. She understood that reputation could be both an asset and a liability in the special operations world. Enemies would prepare more carefully for encounters with her team, but allies would trust her judgment even in impossible situations. As Alpha Team prepared for their next deployment, Chen reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small-town Texas girl to the most feared sniper in the American military. The path had been marked by countless hours of training, years of combat experience, and a level of dedication that had cost her any semblance of a normal life. But sitting in the operations center at Bagram, surrounded by teammates who trusted her with their lives, Chen knew that she had found her calling. In a world where violence and chaos seemed to be winning, she represented something that her enemies could never understand: the possibility that one person, with enough skill and determination, could change the outcome of an entire war. The legend of Ghost had been born in the mountains of Afghanistan, forged through impossible shots and tactical brilliance that defied explanation. But the woman behind the legend remained focused on the mission, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, new enemies were planning new attacks that would require new miracles to stop. Chen cleaned her rifle one more time and prepared for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. In the special operations community, legends were made one impossible shot at a time, and Sarah Chen had proven that sometimes the impossible was just another day at the office. The mountains of Afghanistan had witnessed the birth of a legend, but they had also seen something more important: the transformation of grief into purpose, doubt into confidence, and individual talent into team excellence. Alpha Team had lost Steele Rodriguez, but they had gained something that would carry them through whatever battles lay ahead. They had gained the Ghost, and with her, They had discovered that sometimes the dead can indeed be brought back to life through the courage and skill of those who refuse to give up on their mission. The legend would live forever, but more importantly, so would the men who had learned to believe in miracles again.